Is an onerous deep state condemning the Marine Corps to repeat the past? I'm talking about the Forsaken Defenders of Wake Island as the general concept here, but I'm referring specifically to the Marine Corps' first anti-ship Littoral Combat Team established in Okinawa. The Littoral Combat Team is a Marine Corps unit designed to be dispersed throughout the first island chain of the Pacific. This is from Task and Purpose. Historic China Marines Battalion converts into latest Littoral Combat Team. 1st Battalion, 4th Marine was established in 1911, later assigned to Shanghai. The battalion surrendered with all U.S. troops in the Philippines in 1942, was reborn as 1st Raider in 1944. We are converting a few battalions of Marines into what's called a Littoral Combat Team. And the Littoral Combat Team, this is from the Marine Corps itself, is a larger force designed intended to remedy challenges created by continued evolution in creative warfare, and this goes into what their mission is. Conduct expeditionary advanced base operation, conduct strike, conduct air and missile defense actions, support maritime domain awareness, support surface warfare, support operations in information environment. And this being from the Marine Corps that goes into specifics about it. Of course, everything is going to be linked into this. This is kind of the Google description, their AI description of it. Focuses on disrupting adversaries in contested littoral environments through reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance, and sea deny operations, supporting maritime campaigns as a stand-in force. Now, the problem comes into they're being asked to operate in an environment that air superiority and air dominance is not something that can be guaranteed, and supply is going to be very, very difficult. Again, the Littoral Combat Teams are designed for the Pacific, to be scattered among the first island chain. The first island chain is under direct threat from the first 850 kilometer, the short-range ballistic missiles of China, and the intermediate and medium range. Why is that important? Because they have hundreds and thousands of these missiles. Area denial is going to be very much a part of the Chinese strategy if it were to come to combat. So you're going to put all these Marines, you have 3 of these is the plan right now, 3 littoral combat teams, out on separate islands where the air bases might not be able to be secured from missiles. Landing support aircraft and supply aircraft is not going to be something you can guarantee. Well, the Navy had thought of that. And they had thought of the light amphibious warship. You notice the had part. Well, the bureaucracy has turned this into the medium, and it's stalled. Because cost overruns, imagine that, cost overruns and bureaucratic BS are getting in the way of creating the logistics chain to support the doctrine the Marines are trying to implement. Going back to this article real quick. At a lower price point, the Navy could buy more ships, and current requirements call for 18 to 35 LSMs. The Congressional Budget Office projected the lead ship in the class to cost anywhere from $460 to $560 million, according to an April report. The Navy buys the 18 to 35 ships according to its plans. Each hull would cost $340 to $430 million. The initial plan was $100 to $150 million. 3 to 4 times. So you can understand why you get this follow-up report. The Navy's medium landing ship called the previous one, Vision to procure, blah, blah, blah. Concept was eyed. And here's where we're at. The Navy's FY 2025 budget submission states that the contract for the construction of the first LSM would be awarded in March 2025 and that the first ship would be delivered in 2029. So you have at this moment virtually no logistical chain other than aircraft for these Marines that you would put out on these isolated islands and expect them to fight a long-term fight. This is regarding those ships anyway. This is important. I'm going to go back to this. The Navy puts a hold on it, puts its next Amphib on hold, because they put it on hold because of cost overruns and things like that, and I think this is relevant. Indeed, it does not appear that the Marines intend to use the LAW once combat begins. If there are indications of a combat may break out, the combatant commander would order the light amphibious warships or LAW to quickly relocate Marines or resupply units. Defense News reported in October, quoting Marine Corps Lieutenant General Karsten Hackle, Deputy Commandant for Command Development and Integration. As war nears, Hackle said, the new amphibious ship goes into hiding. It goes into bed down somewhere. Nowhere do we envision the LAW out transiting the sea lanes in the middle of a kinetic fight. So how the hell do you intend to supply your Marines that you just stuck on some godforsaken rock in the middle of the ocean with a bunch of missiles, and you said, area deny, you are to attack enemy shipping, enemy aircraft coming into this area, defend yourself. Oh, by the way, we can't really supply you except by air. Oh, and air superiority is no longer a guarantee. So what's your plan? Well, we do have these $2.2 billion Wasp amphibious assault ships and these America amphibious assault ships, $3.4 billion apiece. Of course, they would have other duties doing Marine Expeditionary Unit duties, because as we go back to the Marine Corps' own description, they see an MEU and an MLR as different. MEU is a composite unit with its own composition. The MLR is a composite unit with its own units. They're a logistical battalion. Okay. Organic operational mobility. That's what I'm referring to. They have no organic operational mobility of their own. The logistics battalion does not have the means to distribute ammunition and fuel at a field level. When you're out stuck on these rocks, air superiority is not guaranteed. You have to assume that your logistics chain is going to be under attack from where it begins all the way to where it ends. So the next thing you know, you have these isolated groups of Marines out in the middle of the ocean who one by one are either going to be isolated and allowed to starve or just sit there like we did with the Japanese in World War II with many isolated islands, Truk being the prime example of that. Or we can start thinking outside the box. We need to think outside the box. You cannot have these lightly armed, slow-moving transports supplying units scattered throughout the Pacific. You have got to think outside the box. For large transport like to Guam from the States or from Guam to Okinawa, I know this is going to sound ridiculous. Something like this. Caspian sea monster, the Ekranoplan. This was capable of 544 tons, range of 932 miles, a wingspan of 123 feet, a length of 300 feet, with a cargo capacity of 500,000 pounds. With that range and that cargo capacity, which could obviously be changed today, and we wouldn't stick these stupid missile launchers and all this other crap that the Soviets had on this thing. This thing was a beast. It was called the Caspian Sea Monster. It's called an Ekranoplan. You take those silly things off there and you use modern design, and you can increase the range, the speed, and the carry capacity of this thing. You got to start thinking outside the box. And for more localized things, from getting from one small island to another, bringing small amounts of things, moving small amounts of Marines around, you've got to think outside the box. Speed is the new stealth. You can't have something trolling about at 15, 20 knots. It's going to get killed. Think outside the box.
Imagine a boat that glides effortlessly across the waves at 3 times the speed of typical marine craft, getting safely to your destination with style and comfort. The Wigetworks AirFish 8 is a novel convergence of aviation technology and marine craft design. Its unique wing geometry and body structure exploits an aerodynamic phenomenon known as wing in-ground effect. An aircraft experiences ground effect when it flies in close proximity to the ground, producing additional lift from the increased air pressure beneath its wings. Flying above the sea's surface means that the AirFish 8 experiences no hydrodynamic drag, making it fuel efficient. Fuel consumption per mile per passenger is lower than conventional high-speed marine craft at high speed. Classified as a marine craft and powered by a car engine running on unleaded petrol, the AirFish 8 is simple to maintain and inexpensive to operate. With a payload of 1,000 kilograms, the AirFish 8 cruises at up to 90 knots with a range of 250 nautical miles. The AirFish 8 is simpler and safer compared to conventional aircraft. Its inherent aerodynamic stability and mechanical simplicity not only makes crew training quick, it also minimizes the risk of accidents caused by human error. The AirFish 8 can land immediately on the water below it with minimal control input should the need arise. The potential of the AirFish 8 is untapped and limitless. It is ideal for tourism, transport, logistics, and even maritime patrol in regions where infrastructure is limited. The AirFish 8 redefines maritime transportation with winging ground effect technology to make passage to unexploited places more convenient, safe, and fast.
Thinking outside the box. Something like the AirFish 8. Now, this is not obviously the design that they would go with, but the fact that this is something that you don't need an airfield for, can essentially beach itself and pull itself off, run a decent amount of supplies and men to make it worthwhile. And this is in the direction that we've been going. The AirFish 8 isn't exactly it. However, we do have DARPA looking at some crazy stuff. DARPA unveiled Ghost, and we did a story about that here on this channel. Ghost being unveiled by General Dynamics. Now, of course, they've got it armed. They have, obviously, you can see right on the top there, vertical launch for missiles and everything. If you can carry missiles, you can carry supplies. If you're going to have this doctrine, you need to think outside the box on how to supply it. You can't afford to send an America-class amphibious assault ship or a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship to resupply your Littoral Combat Regiment out in the middle of nowhere when they have their own responsibilities, make themselves a prime target with hundreds and thousands of Marines and sailors aboard, when there's better ways, cheaper ways, faster ways, thinking outside the box ways. Is that Ekranoplan thing the answer? I'm not saying it is the answer. What I'm saying is that it is something that should be considered, that people need to, in our government, in our defense industry, think outside the box and be willing to consider things that you normally wouldn't. To see something like the AirFish and see the possibilities scattered amongst multiple islands, to have this, I've always considered this to be a breakthrough technology. My concern is that we will have more forsaken defenders of this island or that island because of our inability to supply them. If you'll indulge me just a moment, I want to give the example and why I mean this. While the Marines made their legendary stand, a relief force being designated to bring supplies and reinforcements to them, Task Force 11, built around the aircraft carrier Saratoga with Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher in command, as well as Task Force 14 under the command of Admiral Wilson Brown in carrier Lexington, slowly made preparations to get underway. Task Force 14 was a feint against the Marshall Islands in an effort to draw Japanese attention away from Task Force 11 in their mission to resupply Wake Island defenders. Task Force 11 did not get underway from Pearl Harbor until 16 December, and Admiral Fletcher stopped to refuel his destroyers on 22 November, lengthening the time it would take to relief force to arrive at Wake. In the meantime, Vice Admiral William Pye, temporary Commander-in-Chief, United States Navy Pacific Fleet, learned that 2 Japanese carriers possibly lurked off Wake Island. On 21 December, a Japanese air raid sent the defenders scrambling for cover. Major Paul A. Putnam, commanding officer of VMF 211, had taken off on an unescorted flight to find Japanese carriers that launched the aircraft. The carriers Hiryu and Soyu, which participated in the Pearl Harbor attack, had joined the Japanese invasion force at Wake Island. For his actions that day, Major Putnam later received the Navy Cross. On 22 December, Wake Island time. 23 December, Wake Island time. Admiral Pye read the urgent message from Commander Cunningham appraising him of the dire circumstances on Wake. Although he had been authorized to evacuate the defenders of Wake, something he realized was impossible due to Japanese controlling of the area, he had been told that the island became a liability. Therefore, Pye ordered Admiral Fletcher's and Admiral Brown to return to Pearl Harbor. Upon reading the message, Admiral Fletcher threw his hat on the deck in disgust, and several of his officers pleaded with him to disobey the order and press on. Fletcher could not, of course, and several sailors hung their head and wept openly in shock and dismay at the thought of having to leave so many of their comrades behind to the enemy. Of the 449 Marines of the 1st Battalion, VMF 211, 49 were killed, 32 were wounded in action, while the rest became prisoners of war. Of the 68 Navy personnel, 3 were killed, 5 wounded. The Army detachment did not lose any of its soldiers, while the 1,146 civilians, 70 killed, 20 wounded. The Japanese lost 381 men plus an unconfirmed number of wounded. They became prisoners till the end of the war. I appreciate your indulgence while I read that. I hope the point of that is brought home. That we are about to put a bunch of Marines in the same situation. And because of the missile dominance, more than the Navy, it's the missile dominance combined with the Navy and Air Force and just the close geographic proximity in the first island chain where this doctrine is to take place, that has me concerned about our ability to keep them supplied and keep them fighting and keep them alive. I'm sure that they would fight to the last. They're the Marines. I would expect nothing more. They would perform their duty as well as Marines have done in the history of the United States. I don't want them to have to do that. That's why I'm concerned. I know this is a little long, but my concern is that the Marines' doctrine is not being supported by the government, the Defense Department, and the bureaucracy, most important. Marines' lives are on the line, and because these politicians and bureaucrats can't get their shit straight, they're in grave danger. Think outside the box. There's ways of doing this. This isn't an impossible situation. The United States has faced what we would consider impossible situations in the past, and we've overcome. This one is not impossible. Is it daunting? Yes. Is it a little frightening? A little. There's a lot of lives on the line. Those Marines out on those islands, and then your inability to supply them, and then the probable attempt to supply them with multiple billion-dollar aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, things like that. When you could be thinking outside the box. Smaller, faster, or faster, bigger. I don't know if those are the answers. But I have a lot of questions because the bureaucracy and the government are not supporting our Marines. And I'm concerned about it. And I wanted to bring it up. Yeah, it's a little long-winded, but I don't care. I hope my point is brought forth and everyone understands it. I appreciate you, and I thank you. If you liked it, hit like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let them know that the bureaucrats, they're endangering our Marines, and they need to get their shit straight.